Hi guys, welcome back to Fairies Tutorials. Now, for the past few sessions, we've been looking at section 4, which is food science and technology, and we explored content 1 where we looked at the production of common food commodities. Now, in today's session, we'll be moving on to content 2, which is entitled Guess What It Is? Based on those pictures, can you guess what it is? We'll be looking at food spoilage and contamination. Stay tuned. Section 4, Food Science and Technology. And in today's session, we'll be looking at content 2, which is entitled Food Spoilage and Contamination. Now, let us look at the focus points. In today's session, we'll be looking at definitions of key concepts and also to explore the factors that impact food spoilage and contamination. These factors are warm temperature, moisture, improper storage, poor food handling, unhygienic surroundings, and also enzymatic actions. Now, these terms are very important in order for us to understand all the concepts that will be learned in today's session. Microorganisms, contamination, cross-contamination, foodborne illnesses, food spoilage, food contamination. Now guys, based on your prior knowledge or experiences, what do you know about these key concepts? Are you able to define any? Well, let us see if you were thinking on the correct path. Now, the first term that we'll be looking at is food spoilage. Food spoilage may be defined as the process of change in the physical and chemical properties of food so that it becomes unfit for consumption. So, food spoilage refers to any change in the physical and chemical properties of food so that it becomes unfit for us to eat. Now, for instance, physical properties would be what we can see, right? So we can see that the bread is growing mold. Good. Now, chemical properties, you know that the nutrients that are found in these foods would have been destroyed or damaged, right? So remember that food spoilage refers to any physical or chemical change in the properties of food that makes it unfit for consumption. The next term that we'll be looking at is microorganisms. Microorganisms refers to microscopic living organisms such as bacteria, molds, or fungus that can be seen only with a microscope, right? So these spores are so tiny that these microorganisms are so small, as the name suggests, micro meaning small. So we can't look on a particular food product and see like the bacteria, right? We have to use a microscope to see these organisms. Good. Now, the next term is contamination. Now, contamination is the undesired occurrence of harmful microorganisms or substances in food. Now, these contamination, as we said before, it may be from harmful microorganisms, or we may also say pathogenic microorganisms. Now, you know that we have microorganisms that are good for our bodies. For instance, when in the making of cheese or yogurt, in the making of cultured dairy products or buttermilk, you know that the bacteria culture is added. However, as it relates to food spoilage and contamination, these microorganisms are very much harmful to one's body, right? Now, other substances that may contaminate food are chemicals or toxins, right? Now, what is cross-contamination? The term cross-contamination refers to the transfer of harmful bacteria from one food to another, or also from hands to food. Now, based on these images that you're seeing, you notice the first one there, you can see where chicken is cutting on the same board as the broccoli. Now, uncooked chicken has the microorganism, the bacteria, Salmonella, right? Now, what can happen in this case is that cross-contamination will take place, so some of that bacteria will get on the vegetables, and guess what? That bacteria may not be killed based on the temperature that the vegetables are cooked, or maybe the person will just have the vegetable raw. So therefore, cross-contamination can take place. Good. Also from unclean utensils or equipment, so bacteria from one thing can transfer to the other. Awesome. Now, food contamination. What is food? We know what contamination is. We know what cross-contamination is. Now, can you tell me what is food contamination? Well, if you're thinking that food contamination refers to the presence of harmful chemicals and microorganisms in food which can cause consumer illnesses or death, you are indeed correct, right? So food contamination refers to the presence of harmful chemicals and microorganisms in food which causes consumer illness, or worst case scenario, depending on how severe the illness is, persons may even die, right? Die from dehydration because they're losing a lot of bodily fluids, so they may vomit, they may have diarrhea, and so forth. Good. Now the next one is foodborne illnesses. Now, foodborne illnesses are those caused by pathogenic bacteria transmitted to humans by food, right? Now, foodborne illnesses are what? Caused by pathogenic bacteria. That means harmful bacteria, and persons will get it by consuming food that has been contaminated. So when you consume food that has been contaminated, then you get what is called foodborne illnesses, and depending on the severity of the illnesses, unfortunately, some persons may also die. Now, let us look at the difference between food contamination and food spoilage. Do you think there's a difference? Based on the terms that we just looked at, are you able to differentiate between food contamination and food spoilage? Or do you think there is actually a difference? Now, food contamination is where food is contaminated with microorganisms or substances, and eating it could result in foodborne illnesses. Good. So a piece of meat may be contaminated with bacteria, but you cannot see it, right? And some bacteria aren't killed by heat, depending on the temperature that the product is being prepared or cooked. Now, on the other hand, food spoilage is any undesirable change in the natural color, taste, or texture of food items that makes it unfit for consumption because it has lost its quality and also its nutritional value. And this is where we speak of the physical and chemical properties are affected. So it has lost its quality, so the physical appearance is not there anymore, and as we speak of chemical properties being damaged, the nutritional value will also be lost or diminished. Good. Now let us look at the factors that impact food spoilage and contamination. Now, before we go on into details, are you able to explain how you think these factors will promote food spoilage and contamination? So we'll be looking at 6 factors. We have warm temperature, moisture, improper storage, poor food handling, unhygienic surroundings, and also enzymatic actions. Now let us go into details. So when bacteria have nutrients, which is the food found in the food, moisture, time, and favorable temperatures, they grow rapidly, increasing in numbers to the point where some can cause illnesses. And when persons eat contaminate or consume contaminated food and they get sick, what term is that referred to as? What condition? Awesome. If you said foodborne illnesses, you're indeed correct. Now guys, understanding the important role temperature plays in keeping food safe is of critical importance. So what does microorganism need to grow? Warmth, moisture, food, and also time. Good. Now let us look at warm temperature. So the danger zone. So the danger zone is found between 40 degrees Fahrenheit to 140 degrees Fahrenheit, right? So bacteria grow most rapidly in the range of temperatures between 40 degrees Fahrenheit and 140 degrees Fahrenheit, doubling in number in as little as 20 minutes. So for example, if there are say for 10 spores that are there, by the next 20 minutes there will be 20, and it just multiply rapidly as long as the conditions are ideal or as long as the food is at the temperature danger zone. Now, if raw meats have been mishandled, and when we speak of mishandled, we're speaking of if they are left in the temperature danger zone, bacteria may grow and produce toxins, which can cause foodborne illnesses. These toxins that are heat resistant are not destroyed by cooking. Therefore, even though you leave the protein was left out, whether it be fish or chicken or whatever the case may be, if it is left out in the temperature danger zone, cooking will not kill the toxins that are produced by the microorganisms, and therefore persons who consume these types of food will become sick. So therefore, even though cooked, meat and poultry mishandled in the raw state may not be safe to eat after proper preparation. So even though it may be cooked at the temperature that it is required to be, you may find out that the toxins that were created by the microorganisms are still there, so the food is still contaminated, and when persons consume these types of food, now they become ill. Now let us look at moisture. How does moisture impact food spoilage or possibly contamination? Now, all food products contain varying amount of water in their tissues. Where there is no moisture, bacteria cannot grow. However, bacteria and molds can both produce spores which can survive until water is added to the food. Now, moisture loss affects both the appearance and texture of foods. For example, the fruit shrinks in size. The skin may become wrinkled, and also leaves become limped or wilted. Good? Now, remember that bacteria cannot multiply without moisture, right? It has to have moisture for them to reproduce. However, remember that bacteria and molds can do what? They can produce spores. And as soon as liquid is added to that particular product, or we may say as soon as moisture is added to the product, then what? They start to reproduce and to multiply, right? And that is why you may find that some methods of food preservation use the process of dehydration. They remove the moisture, and they may also alter the temperature that we looked at before. So we speak of heating. In altering the temperature, we speak of heating, and also freezing may take place, right? And in moisture, controlling moisture for dehydration, for example, even in salt fish, right? The salt is added to help to remove the moisture from the fish. Awesome. Now let us look at how improper storage may impact food spoilage and contamination. The proper storage of foods minimizes the potential contamination and growth of microorganisms. Microorganisms are so small that they cannot be seen. And which instrument we have to use to see the microorganisms, guys? If you said microscope, you are correct. If the storage is warm and humid, fruits and vegetables left in the open will spoil quickly. Now, have you ever bought some fruits before and have them, probably you bought them at the market, but you have them tied up in the bag? What will eventually happen to those fruits, right? Now, a refrigerator temperature above 40 degrees Fahrenheit allows for the growth of spoilage bacteria, right? So the refrigerator temperature must be adjusted so that the spoilage bacteria can be halted. Good. Now, food items should be stored separately in tightly sealed containers. Refrigerators set below 40 degrees Fahrenheit will prevent pathogenic bacteria from growing freely. Freezers are ideal for long-term storage. To properly store foods in the freezer, air should be what? Should be removed from the container as much as possible from the container, right? And temperature is set at or below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, let us look at how poor food handling contaminates food or cause food spoilage. Now, the term food handler can be applied to anyone who touches or handles food. And this includes people who process, transport, prepare, cook, and serve food. So you can see the different areas where food contamination may take place or food spoilage. The process of food spoilage may start, right? So we're looking at during processing, during transportation, during preparing the food and cooking, and also to serve, right? All of these process or stages, food can be contaminated. Now, the microorganisms transmitted to food by food handlers may come from the skins of animals, soils, water, dust, gastrointestinal tracts, and other environmental sources. Now, which term did we define that is most fitting to describe this process? If you said cross-contamination, guys, you are correct. Now, in food preparation, foodborne microorganisms can be introduced from the unwashed hands of people who are infected by bacteria and viruses, good, and who cook and also who serve the food to the customers. Now, food utensils are cutting boards, knives, spoons, bowls, and other equipment used in food preparation can also become contaminated during the food processing and preparation stage. Good. Also, food contamination or cross-contamination as well. For example, in families where there is no access to running water, the food utensils may not be properly cleaned, stored, and handled, and may become a major route for food contamination. Now, how does enzymatic action affects food spoilage or food contamination? Right? Now, what are enzymes? Based on your prior knowledge, what are enzymes and what is the function of enzymes? Good. Now, many enzymes are present in foods and some are inactive until food is harvested or slaughtered. Good. So many enzymes are found in foods, even so like all living things, right? So what happens is the purpose of enzyme is to break down, right? Let's think of digestion. When our bodies is digesting, don't the enzymes help to break down these food products and the substances that are found in food? Right? So similarly, enzymes presented may also, as long as it is active, may start the deterioration process of the food. Now, once activated, such enzymes speed up the process of decay by breaking down the tissues and components of the food in different ways, right? So once activated, as soon as the item is picked, as soon as it is harvested or slaughtered in terms of animals, then enzymes start to work. And if we don't control the ideal temperatures for microorganisms to reproduce or for enzymes to be inactive as much as possible, then eventually deterioration will take place. Good. And then by the time you know it, the food is spoiled and also contaminated. Now, let us look at oxidation and enzymatic browning. Take a look at this apple on your right. Have you ever experienced something like this? Which food product or fruits have you bought, even meat, and you realize after a while it starts to turning brown as soon as the surface is exposed to air, or we may say exposed to oxygen? Good. If you're listing right bananas, apples, and meat, you're indeed correct. Now, oxidized enzymes cause destruction of certain nutrients. Example, vitamin C, thiamine, and carotene. If some foods such as apples are cut or even bruised, the damaged surface will discolor and turn brown due to the activity of the enzyme. So remember, the process of enzyme is to break down. And once the enzyme has been activated, then guess what? The process of deterioration starts to take place. Now, to minimize the action of enzymes, an acid is usually added, right? So some form of citric acid is usually added, preferably lime juice, especially if we're using it on fruits and some vegetables. Good. Now, ripening. Did you know that ripening can cause food to spoil? Let's take a look at the process of the banana. It starts green and you notice that gradually the color changes. So ripening is taking place. So enzymes are involved in the process that causes ripening in foods such as fruits and vegetables. Example, unripe bananas contain starch, which is gradually converted to sugar until the banana becomes very sweet and its skin color changes from green to yellow and eventually dark brown. And enzymes are also responsible for the ripening of fruits. Good. Now, how does unhygienic surroundings cause food spoilage and contamination? Let's take a look at this kitchen. What are some of the things that you can see? You're seeing animals. There's a dog in the kitchen, which can also transfer microorganisms to the food. There are insects. The counter is dirty. You can see contamination taking place all over. Now, an unhygienic surrounding like this, do you think it can cause food contamination? Certainly it does. It can cause food contamination, cross-contamination can take place, and eventually when these microorganisms produce toxins on the meat, even if it is cooked, persons can become ill and will have foodborne illnesses. As you can see, there is chicken, there is poultry on the counter, there is seems like a piece of beef on the counter, and what you're realizing, guys, it is at what? It is at the temperature danger zone, right? So unhygienic surroundings is indeed a cause of food contamination, right? Awesome. Now, activity. Based on what we just discussed, you should be able to define the following terms: contamination, food spoilage, food contamination, and foodborne illnesses. Number 2, discuss at least 4 factors that impact food spoilage and contamination. Did you find this information useful? If you haven't subscribed as yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Also, remember to like and share this information with persons who you know will find this video useful. Thank you for making it Fairy's Tutorial.